Hi, this is Randy from Fried Eggs Golf, and welcome to Over Easy. In this week's episode, I'm going to try not to talk for the next 10 minutes about what happened at the Open Championship this weekend, but it's going to be hard because it was an amazing finish. A finish for the ages. One that I've been looking for since I started watching golf, and I think everybody back in the day was praying for like a Phil Mickelson-Tiger Woods showdown on Sunday where they're going back and forth at one another, and we just never got it. We've never been able to have anything like this in golf before, and I hope everyone that watched appreciates that and understands that what they witnessed you probably won't ever see again. You have Mickelson shoot 65, Stenson shoot 63, and they just never let up. You know, they just back and forth, just one birdie after another, and I thought for sure that once they hit the back nine, Stenson would start to feel the pressure, but in all honesty, he just pushed on the accelerator even harder. And I think he played at a level that he himself was the only one that knew he was capable of. Because I didn't see that. I in a million years I never would have guessed. Even after the first 3 rounds and the front 9 there, I thought for sure that he would start to come back down to earth as the pressure started to build and Phil started to charge. But he did the exact opposite. I mean, he made 2 huge putts there at the end. Obviously on 18 it was already clenched, but just to finish in that fashion just speaks levels of where that guy's game is and what he can potentially do when his game is on. And wow, it was amazing. My pick, if you watched the previous video, was a little off. It was Rory McIlroy, who did finish quite well in the tournament. I believe he was tied for 5th. But when your competition beats you by 15 strokes, it's kind of hard to say, hey, at least it was a top 5, because it was nowhere near the lead. And I think that if you look at the scorecards of really everybody that played that golf tournament, I mean, obviously Stenson and Phil were head and shoulder above everybody else, but take a look at the back 9 scores of those guys, because everyone else just tore it up on the front, and then on the back 9, it seemed to be just bogey fest. And I think McIlroy fell victim of that himself, because I believe he played the front like 10 under for the week, and then after that, everything just kind of slipped away on the back. And I'm sure everyone saw the replay of him breaking his 3-wood, but it was still a good showing for him. You're talking about a top 5 finish in a major, but nevertheless, it was an incorrect pick. But I do want to mention, however, because out of all the comments on that video, nobody mentioned Stenson. Nobody said Henrik Stenson at all. There was, I double checked, I went through, and I even misspelled his name purposely to see if anything popped up, and no one picked him, and it just blew my mind. But I will mention, however, that James Harity, if you're out there, I have no idea where you pulled this from unless you have like a full-size mural of Phil in your living room, because James Harity commented on last week's video, Mickelson will win at Royal Troon. And it was really hard for me not to send a message back to you at first when I saw that, being like, this is the most ridiculous pick like I've ever seen in my life. And then after the first day, I thought about writing you back and saying that was the best pick I've ever seen in my life, but I wanted to see how it played out. And obviously, I mean, geez, oh Pete's, to shoot 17 under in a major championship and not win, that just has to, wow, it just doesn't happen. I mean, you had Tiger, you had Rory, you had Spieth, you had Day just run away with majors and shoot right around the same score, and it has to be so disheartening. But hats off to Phil Mickelson, and a huge applause for Henrik Stenson for being a player that I had no idea he was even capable of being. So, without any delay, let's jump into some questions. So let's do that. That's something new, right? Funny Onquel. I just started golf and I can barely play. What do you think about using swing analyzers such as ZEP to improve one's swing? I don't have a lot of experience with this so-called ZEP swing analyzer, but I will tell you to be careful, and I think I've mentioned this before, when you're using data to analyze your swing this early in the game, when you're just starting, I don't want you to get too bogged down in the numbers and try to analyze your game that way. Work on the fundamentals, the basics, your posture, your grip, your stance, your alignment. Once you start to feel comfortable with those and you're making consistent impact with the face, that's really where the numbers start to benefit the teaching aspect. Obviously, we can do some fitting things to help increase consistency, but make sure that you have the fundamentals down before you start to try to analyze numbers, because one, you can confuse yourself, and two, you can make the game seem not fun in the early stages, and that's really when it's most fun, is because you're out there trying to have a good time. And I think that that's important, not to get too bogged down with analyzing your swing quite yet. But eventually, you'll get there, I promise. Matt Ondecker, I'm trying to teach the game to my 8-year-old daughter. Getting her clubs is difficult. She's too tall for junior clubs, but adult clubs are too long. Don't want to get custom because then she'll outgrow them. Is there a better way for her to play with clubs that are too long or too small? I grew up in this exact situation. I lived it and I survived, but I will warn you that playing with clubs, not so much that are too long, but too heavy, can be detrimental to developing a good swing habits. I believe I was 4 feet 11 inches when I was 13 years old, which was when I started to get serious into the game. And we talked about my dad and I custom fitting, but back then there wasn't a whole lot of option for junior golfers and getting custom fit. I think La Jolla was the name of the brand that I was obsessed with, but it was crazy expensive to get any set made. So what had happened is I ended up buying a full-length set of men's clubs in steel and choked them down. And I know from experience now, and what I see in my swing is that it was very heavy and it created some bad habits. I get too extended at the top. I get way past parallel, and most of that is because at a young age I couldn't handle the weight as far as slowing that momentum down on my backswing, and my swing got a little long and it created some bad habits. But it didn't cost any extra money, and I played that set almost all the way through high school, and it worked out fine for me. But we know a little bit more now, and I think that if you get her a proper ladies petite set, like a ladies set that's graphite, lighter weight, but an inch short under ladies standard, and she can play that for a little while, just choking down on it. Obviously when she grows, she'll get towards the end of the club, and then that way you're not just putting maybe a year or two into a set. She can play with it for a couple of years, so hopefully that helps out. Adam Dennison, Randy, if you are inconsistent off the tee with the driver during a round, do you keep using it in hopes of figuring out or what you're doing wrong, or do you scrap it for a safer option like a 3-wood or a hybrid? I'm referring both recreational and scoring rounds. I'm glad you added the last part, because I was going to mention that. If I'm playing in a competition round of golf and I'm hitting the driver poorly, I only have to hit it bad a couple of times before it stays in the bag for the rest of my day. Now, obviously, each shot and each hole is going to be different, because if you're on a very forgiving, wide open hole, swing it as hard as you can and don't worry about it. I mean, that's really where you're to see if there's anything there to salvage, to save. But don't sit there and keep hitting balls out of bounds or into hazard or into deep rough or whatever it may be, just to try to work it out in a competition round. Now, if you're playing just a recreational round with friends, or you're even playing a practice round, yeah, hit it. I mean, try to work it out. I mean, that's why you're out there, I hope, when you're practicing, is to figure out how to take what you've done on the driving range and you can replicate it on the course. So don't just go out there and keep hitting balls into bad positions. Switch down to a 3-wood, switch down to a hybrid, and hopefully as the round progresses and you get into maybe a little bit more of a forgiving hole, take the driver back out and hit it and see if it's still in that same situation. Because I can't tell you how many times I've ruined rounds, well, not ruined them, but it started them out in a bad way by hitting driver out of bounds on a first tee. That was like, I just never understood the whole just get it out in the middle of the fairway on the first hole, build some confidence, and then get more aggressive as the round goes on. I always just wanted to go full out from the very beginning. But my method, I don't sit there and keep hitting bad shots all day. It's just not in my mindset. I want to play the best golf that I can. So don't bail on it all day, but get rid of it if it's hurting you early, and then maybe come back to it. Sammy Manning. I guess this is kind of a double question here. Sam Manning, do some golf stores really jack the numbers on their launch monitors? And there's a second part to this asked by another person that had a continuation on it, but I'll get to that in a second. Do some golf stores really jack the numbers on their launch monitors? If they did, that's just despicable. I don't even trying to think of how you would even do it, because within the GC2 that we use at our store, there's not really a way to manipulate the numbers other than to adjust the wind and go in and I'm not sure, I can't remember if they've gotten rid of it. There used to be a power setting mode where you could compensate for the type of ball they were using. You could, like if you're using a range ball that doesn't compress much and it doesn't go very far, you could tune that into more of a Pro V style, but I didn't know how to gauge for that, so I never used it. But you could also manipulate the wind on them, on the GC2, where you can make it downwind, and that would just be scandalous. But when you're getting fit, there's always displays up, and the wind gauge will read 0, and the power meter will read 0 as far as the boost on it. I don't know. It just like upsets me that question even exists, because I'm sure there are just dirty like retail stores that try to boost numbers to increase sales. But why would you do that? The customer's going to take it out on the drive or on the course or driving range, hit it, and realize it's going nowhere near what you said it was, or not performing like you said it would, and they're going to be disgruntled and upset. So that would be counterproductive on a retail standpoint. I would rather a person be just pass on buying the driver than buying one that I've manipulated numbers on or lied to them on, because then it all comes back on me and it makes me look like an idiot, and then that loses business, and you all know how that word of mouth gets out, and that's not good for anybody. Now the second part of that question was also referring to, I guess, the honesty of retail shops. It's Darren Seiko, and he asked, do their putter greens funnel towards the hole? And I've thought about this question when I first saw this, when this first got messaged in my inbox. I built personally with a friend of mine the putting green that sits in our shop right now, and I'll tell you from my carpentry skills that there's no way that I would be skilled enough to make it funnel towards the hole. Having said that, this is the thing we get all the time. People are like, oh, I make them all the time in the shop, but they never go in on the green. Well, one, there's not a lot of pressure in the shop, and two, there's no imperfections on the mat itself. There's no bumps, there's no grains of sand or dirt or worm hills or whatever you want to say. So there's not a lot to go wrong. But I have to put another clause on this. You have to think of how these putting greens in stores are trafficked. People putt, they walk towards the hole to pick the ball out. Well, guess what that does? It starts to take the path, and as it gets closer to the hole from whatever direction they walk towards that hole, it starts to pat it and mash it and push it down a little bit. So I don't want to say it funnels it towards the hole, but anytime that you start to push that artificial turf down, yeah, it's going to make it seemingly kind of bend towards the hole a little bit, because people traffic the hole. They don't walk in a straight line every time, but as you get closer to the hole, those footprints become more consistent around it, and that can cause the ball to seemingly drop more on an artificial green. I shouldn't have said that, but I that's more of a theory, I think, of mine. I don't know if it's ever been tested, but it seems logical, I think. So, yeah, but make sure you don't buy a putter anywhere that you can't take it out to your course, putt with it for a couple of days, and not be able to exchange it. I mean, as long as you're not putting out of bunkers with it, you should be fine. Stin DeShepper, what is so difficult about interpreting the numbers that launch monitors provide? It's not so much the difficulty, it's that what works for one person isn't the same for the other. So if a guy comes in and gets fit, and I say that you need to launch it at 14 degrees with 2,900 RPMs of spin because your ball speed and your club head speed is this. That guy then takes that information, and let's say he passes it on to a friend. Well, now his friend comes in, gets fit, and he's like, well, my numbers aren't the same as his numbers. So that's where the confusion starts to set in. As ball speeds change, as club head speeds change, as launch angles and spin rates are different for pretty much everybody, it's hard to just say these numbers work for you. So there's a nice little, typically it's almost like a graph that a lot of the manufacturers use now, where if you launch it at this number, with this amount of spin, with this club head speed, these are pretty close to the optimal numbers that will produce the most distance that you can get with your club head speed. So it's not really the difficulty, it's how to apply them. Everyone can see 3,000 RPMs of spin and know what that means. It's 3,000 RPMs of spin. Everyone sees ball speed and launch angle and knows what that means, but it's the combination of those numbers and how they apply to the individual that it can make it confusing. And then, of course, there's manipulating those numbers or trying to get them to go in the right direction, and that's really where the expertise and experience comes in of a club fitter, being able to diagnose the problem and then assess, what club, loft, flex, whatever it may be to help benefit your game. So that's a good question. Mark Blades, what was your handicap before turning pro? Well, Mark, and I don't know if I've ever mentioned this on the channel, I'm not a professional. I never have been a professional, and I'm not sure if I ever will be a professional. That's really up for debate. I've actually, in the last year and a half since I've started this channel, actually started to question whether or not I wanted to become pro. Now, the reason I didn't to begin with is because I was under the, we'll call it the delusion of when I graduated from college, I had hopes of staying competitive and playing in amateur events. Now, I knew I wasn't good enough to go out, and I didn't have the time to commit to trying to turn pro and play in professional events and start out on the smaller tours. I knew I didn't have the game, nor did I have the patience or time or mentality to practice or to improve my game in that aspect. But I wanted to still play in competitive rounds, so I wanted to stay in amateur so I could play in local events, in amateur events that don't cost as much money, and there's not any qualifying. You just pay your fee and you can go out and play, and it's fun and it's competitive and it keeps the game sharp. That didn't happen. I played out of college. I think I played in maybe a handful of events. Did decent, nothing crazy, but the game from the college days wasn't there anymore because, as we all know, when you stop practicing, the game stops showing up. So I committed myself more to my practice as a club fitter as opposed to my practice on the range, and I didn't think I was ever going to stay in that path. I always thought that I'll get back into playing, but we all say that, and it never really happens. And it wasn't until I started this YouTube channel that I got the itch again, which is weird to say after playing for 15 years. Or how many years have I been playing now? Well, competitively for like 16, I guess. So I've been playing almost 20 years. Wow. Flies. But I got that itch back, like I got when I was younger, where it's like, I want to go to the course. I'm upset because I can't get to the course. I want to play more. I kind of lost that for a while when I started working retail because it lost its magic. And after I started this channel back up, I have to tell you, I've played more rounds of golf in the last year and a half than I've played probably in the previous 5. And I love it. I absolutely love it. I've kind of regained that feeling of how golf makes me feel and how I never want it to not be a part of my life, whether I work in it or not. So will I become pro? I don't know. We'll have to see where this goes. I think it would be beneficial for myself as a club fitter and also as a successful YouTuber, if that's what I want to be, is to become a professional and be able to pass that information, and because there is a lot of learning involved. There's book work, there's more me getting into the mechanical side of the swing and understanding how to translate it and then pass that on to others. I think that could be a huge benefit, but I'm undecided. Maybe you guys can sway me one way or another. Put it in the comments section. Let's see, I think that was the last one on this page. Nope. Let's go. Brian Caves. Randy, love the videos. I have a new Ping G irons, love them except for the strong loss that the manufacturers are gung-ho on these days. Not much backspin, stopping power on the other end. Thinking about bending them 1.5 degrees, I assume you mean weaker. How much to bend the degrees before it affects the performance of the iron? Concerned about the leading edge sticking up too much. That's a legitimate concern. I don't think at a degree or two you're gonna affect it too much, just because iron swings tend to be a little bit steeper. They tend to trap the ball, and a degree or so I don't think is gonna make that big of a difference. On the other end, I don't know if it's gonna make that drastic of a difference in the spin rates. It will launch the ball a little bit higher. It might get a little bit more spin and give you a little bit more stopping power. My recommendation would be to maybe, in the lower irons especially, play a club that offers a little less forgiveness. I don't want to say that in a bad way, like I want you to play a blade, but one that spins more. Typically irons that are less forgiving have higher lofts on them, like your trying to give you an example, like an XR Pro in Callaway XR Pro irons in the lower irons, and then when you get to the higher irons, go to the like XR, the XROS irons to give you a little bit more forgiveness and higher launch in the longer irons. But and I guess I should have explained it. What he means by bending it, when you bend the club stronger, it's going to decrease the bounce. When you bend the club higher loft, it's going to increase the bounce, and it's going to take that leading edge and it's going to lift it up off the ground. And when you lift that leading edge off the ground on a tightly mown, firm fairway, you'll have a higher risk of blading it and catching it thin and not in the center of the club. So there's legitimate concern there. I don't know if I'd go to bending it. I think I might look into maybe replacing shorter irons where you need that spin and that stopping power with maybe a little bit higher lofted, a little bit less forgiving that set that spins a little bit more. That's just kind of shooting from the hip there. It's hard to say without seeing you swing. But good luck with that. Let's do one more, just because I feel like we have had a pretty good run here. This is Tommy WT1. I've always thought about if I was in the position to pick any manufacturer sponsors, who would it be? Who do you get the hat, glove, ball deal from? What clubs? Would you Rory or Ricky and go all one company, or would you mix it up? I'd love to mix it up, but it doesn't seem like that's where the dollars are in the PGA Tour. And these guys, I mean, if you think about it, they win less frequently than any other athlete on the planet Earth, and they also don't make a salary, which, if you think about it, is absolute madness, because you think about your soccer, your football, baseball, basketball, there's really not another sport, maybe, besides tennis, that you're not a salaried athlete. So your money comes from these endorsement deals, and it comes from these manufacturers that want to sponsor you, and that's really where your quote-unquote salary lies, because let's face it, winning on the PGA Tour, you consider how many professional golfers are out there, it's seemingly impossible. But I think you would have to, just for a financial standpoint, unfortunately you shouldn't look at it that way, but you'd have to go to one manufacturer, that way you get the deal, because I know a lot of times they don't like it when you play a mixed bag, and it's hard to get sponsorship, even though TaylorMade seems to, I don't want to pick on them, but they seem to rent out the bag and the head covers, but when they pull off the head covers, it's a lot of times it's not what they say is like in the bag itself. But like Luke Donald, he plays TaylorMade woods and Mizuno irons, which is kind of cool. And I think he had an exotic in his bag for the longest time, which is kind of cool. And I think I would like to stick with one manufacturer just to be consistent. I think he needs a muffler. But I would stick with one manufacturer to stay consistent, and then I would throw in some clubs in there that I think would kind of mix it up a little bit. But if you think about it from a performance standpoint, you should just play every single club exactly the way you want it and exactly how that you hit the absolute best. But we all know that's not the way it goes, and that's not the way the world turns, because it's always about the mighty dollar. It stinks, but that's just the way it is. So thank you for watching, as always. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Hit that thumbs up button if you like the video. Questions or comments, anything like that, put them down in the comment section below. I love reading those things. And other than that, I will see you guys next time.